How's everyone doing? I'm going to be going over the book Giordano Bruno, the Umbris, Idearum on the Shadow of Ideas and the Art of Memory. This one is translated and introduced by Scott Gonsnell. The Art of Memory, Giordano Bruno, first part. Then our plan is to pass on the art of the shadows of ideas, to lead you out from your sleeping nature, from error, misdirection, and being led astray, from deficiencies of energy. Now, I speak on deficiencies of energy in the sense that you're missing the cell salts from your body. You have 12 inorganic cell salts, which are in your diet, and a lot of people are deficient in these cell salts. And these are, there I go saying, these are prevalent in your food. So the way to do that is to stop engaging in expelling your sexual energy so much, and to raise the Christ oil along the spinal column. To support, strengthen you, correct errors, achieve perfect results, and make you the emulation of industriousness. So perfection is what you're seeking from within and without. There is indeed an art to these things which follows something like an architectural discussion, and also the habits of everyone who has a rational soul, from that which is the vital principle of life, from each and every one according to the principle of extension and life. No power relies on any special faculty, but only as it is inhabited by the essence of the whole, as a branch relies on the strength of the whole tree. Okay, so that's saying, one part of the body relies on the other. You have your 12 systems in your body. So if you have one part of the body that's deficient, it's ultimately going to affect the other part of the body. Like I mentioned, this is really a surprising book that I came across that actually synchronized with some other literature, The Light of Egypt being one of those. I was really happy to see that in the book by Thomas H. Burgoyne, and also, what's the other book? Oh, well. What should we suppose, in fact, the power of memory consists of? Does it issue from the intellect? If in the intellect, then how do memories, sense impressions, and desires travel? Furthermore, we wish to know how we regulate and direct through it our understanding, reasoning, memory, imagination, desires, and similar thoughts. Truly, with regard to the general singular and collective functions with which the soul is born, what are they? How do they operate? It is not sufficient to reveal that what the soul seeks is art that clothes the soul, that the soul clothes the art. Would it not be appropriate to try to restore the skill using the means by which she, who we call Mother Nature, frequently acts? None may speak as though there are many arts of the organ, which though they use the pipe organ, play the pipe organ, yet many claim that their art has nothing of the pipe organ in it. So, that's to say, you're reading this book and your body has nothing of this book in it, though you're your body. It's similar to saying this. What are they to say other than that their art is made from the very instrument is crafted and fashioned from it? What is it if not that? Moreover, if there is no existing organ, how can another be fabricated? Explain to me how the art can proceed. In what way do the pre-existing techniques of the organ exist? It was formed in the first place through the reception of outside determination. But if vulgar philosophers have a difficult time believing that an external object should be produced from primary essence, How much more so in the case of something produced from eternal material. So you here have it was formed in the first place through the reception of outside determination. Okay, so it's existentialism is what we're talking about here. We're talking about existentialism. And that's what they mean here by vulgar philosophers when they speak on this. How much more so in the case of something produced from eternal material? If this is our intention, don't you realize? If this is so, it appears to be the better philosophical practice of the created first of an art. Nothing else can be said, but which nature left a gap. It is filled by reason, which from the seeds of the first principles, therefore has the power to illuminate as if from the outside all its features and attractions illuminated, as it were by the sun, and illustrated through the agency of the intellect, using eternal ideas to combat the influence of the stars, directing and obtaining the resources necessary for the act generated by the greatest good. From such manifestations, without risk of contradiction, we declare that this is a natural fount of all the arts and substances. Consider, therefore, what intentions it is possible to express. So let's go back over here first and kind of break down these words a little bit. If it is so, it appears to be better philosophical practice of that created first of an art, nothing else can be said, but which nature left the gap is filled by reason. So here you have the sacred feminine aspect, and it's saying without what came after imagination, which would have to be intellect, which is reason. Okay, which from the seeds of the first principles, therefore has the power to illuminate. So seeds of the first principles would be getting down to the core of consciousness below all the subconscious material, is what they're saying. To illuminate as from the outside all its features and attractions, illuminated as it were by the sun and illustrated through the agency of the intellect, using eternal ideas to combat the influence of the stars, directing and obtaining the resources necessary for the act, generated by the greatest good. So it's talking about generation and obtaining what is required in order to obtain perfection and godhood. It's talking about what's required. So far we have getting to the core of the true self of the mind, and we also have the 12 cell souls. From such manifestations, without risk of contradiction, we declare that this is the natural fount of all the arts and substances. Consider, therefore, what intentions it is possible to express in such excellent nature and art which one has not yet mastered. And this is where we talk about your true self, which I speak of in other presentations, that each one of us have the ability to manifest our true selves through this perfection. A lot of people haven't found their true selves, which is a great reason why the world is the way it is, right? Possibly. I also mentioned, I put a caveat in there that perhaps the world wouldn't be any different, if people followed these practices. Maybe it would. We're all part of a cell, right? We all know that. We're all part of one big organic cell. We should know that by this point, right? Someone had to invent the organ, for organs do exist. It could be of the nature of something more remote rather than that which is seen close at hand, that same can be perpetuated in substantial form, but not on the other hand perpetuated if one's art does not extend that far. Actual external forms, as in the figure of intentions from the clavis magna, are as difficult to make as a stone such as a diamond. Such conditions, acts, names, and memory, and durable objects as would be permanently committed to memory, these are not possible to retain naturally. So he's saying here that there's magical memory. He's saying there's memory that doesn't rely solely on the intellect, is what he's saying here. Committed to memory, these are not possible to retain naturally any more than the fluctuations of material in the stomach, which digest everything, could be indefinitely retained. So there you have, talking about manifestation and magical memory, which is to be definitely different from intellectual memory, where a lot of people try to actually learn in that manner and fail. A lot of people fail in that regard, and people wonder why. Well, there must be something wrong. I can't remember. But really, not everybody remembers that way. They remember in a more spiritual manner. But the problem is, people have lost that. They've lost that knowledge of the true self. Let's see. But where do I say the faculty for this art lies? Where talent thrives, which genius lies closet, humanity. Upon what are the true man's faculties first express, nature's true labor. Therefore, if you would find the true root of this and exact, the clavis magna, or great key, which is referred to repeatedly within the Umbris, is either a book that Bruno intended to write in addition to the Umbris, or that he wrote but never published. So the great key, or that otherwise lost, or maybe an alternate title for the Umbris as a whole, or the second half of the book titled Giordano Bruno's The Lana's Art of Memory, or might even be the book that results from entering the Umbris into one's memory using the techniques of the physical book. According to Francis Yates, the Umbris is purported to be the simplified version of the system in clavis, if one can believe that this is a simplified version of anything. Or transparent it completely, then worship nature and give respect where respect is due. This can be accomplished with much shouting and crying at the beginning when you initially apply yourself to it. And that might be true for some people. When I first started upon this path, it's definitely difficult. It's definitely tough. But it's interesting how he says it could be accomplished with much shouting and crying. That's interesting. Nature invented the body for the soul and supplies instruments fit for the soul, through which argued the Pythagoreans and the clever Magi. So he says here, nature invented the body for the soul and the supplies instrument fit for the soul. Okay, so here you have two schools of thought, which I mentioned earlier. It's basically saying that there's a spiritual world and a physical world, and that the physical world and the spiritual world are separate in one school of thought, but there's the Gnostics who believe that they're together. Through which the Pythagoreans, it's saying right here, the Pythagoreans, right? And the clever Magi. The body and the soul discover life. Your very nature, unless you turn away from it, shall be present in all things. For the universal nature of our duty is not limited. Jupiter, I'll have to take a note right there because I'm actually studying that right now for the presentation in Spanish. Pen. Jupiter rains down over all that sprouts. And all over the plant shines kind Apollo. But not all things are imbued with equal life, nor all things perfectly interchangeable, which you have your detriments in your planetary bodies, in your angels, in your angles, in your demons, and your daemons, and you also have your maleficent, right? Malefic. You have your malefic bodies, right? In astronomy. Which it doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to be, a bad human being. A lot of people I don't want to keep saying that term. There's people that think that when they hear these terms in astrology, they think that you're going to be a bad person because you have, a malice. You have malice in your astrology chart. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have those bad qualities. It means that you're going to have to work harder to overcome those traits that are innate in your zodiac chart, is what it means. And over all the plants shines kind Apollo, but in all things are imbued with equal life. Okay, since therefore every possible nature would stand before us, whether before nature or in nature or from nature, we begin every action from an understanding of nature, and nature cannot therefore be ignored. So there you have an example of the trivium. For example, you have an object which you take in and then you manifest it into reality. And he's saying that you can't ignore nature, is what he's saying, because it's something that's tangible that can be seen. So if nature's distraught, there must be a causal factor making nature distraught. Just as you have certain elements that create a storm, there's certain elements on the planet upon humanity that cause destruction. Howsoever distinguished through the action of whatever common philosophy, this cannot be denied. I would have this attributed to me as an organ to its operator as a branch is extended, because we understand the least tied to the common philosophy is that which nature calls materials connected to forms, but also through the recognition of the intrinsic and efficient principles. Whether altogether or as we may otherwise suppose, through the ways they are connected. The foolish speak the loudest, whereupon the nature of this man is compared to that one. There is no universal logic to this, for we do not perceive this as a logical whole, nor do we grasp through appearance only, rather in physical existence we make the connection that it is in all, so it is in each. So here you have an allusion to Maya. We do not grasp nature through appearance only. He's saying it's not only what we see, it's also what we have within us that expresses outward nature. It's an emotion. It's also something spiritual. It's not just physical objects. that make us. A lot of people think that the planet is just some dead mechanized thing, and it's not. It's not just some dead mechanized thing. This is the mediator between sensible things which are past or absent and those things which are present and conspicuous. On the other hand, there are those things which have the visual weight of sculptures or images. On the other hand, words that flow forth as if produced from nothing. These become stable and fixed as if written down. If so, then concepts and silent intentions become intimately communicable, accessible at all places and times. That book of fate, without necessity, without good, without a demiurge. And I went over the demiurge, I think, in another presentation. Excuse me if I haven't posted that yet. And the demiurge is what gives us the delusion, which gives us Maya. The imperfect, the Jehovah, I guess you can even relate it to an extension of the Jehovah God, but I'm not going to call it the Jehovah God because right now I'm going to be going over a different presentation on that. Communicated even to the lowly, motion and time proceed according to their principles, whether they singly or all together. Hence the series progresses, it is said, by this art as if led by the hand. For that reason, as it pertains to our purpose and intention, in earlier times we wrote on the bark of trees with knives. Then there followed the age of inscribing words on stones and then using juice on papyrus. Next, sheets of parchment and pens dipped in artificial ink. Accordingly, the paper and pen speak to the use of the most appropriate writing. Thus, writing has progressed from style to sponges, sponges to reeds, reeds to quill pens, and now to the cast letters of the printing press. Just the same way, internal writing memory has advanced. So what the author's saying is that as time has progressed, just as outward technology has progressed, so has inward spirituality in the human being progressed. That's the argument here, or the thesis. Whether in ancient times the great poet Simondonius or some other source handed down the following how to use locations and imaginary figures, charts, and writing, with imagination and cognition in place of writing in the pen. Inscribed things we would remember from our studies in our internal book of memory. Let them judge our efforts against those previously accomplished. Now we start the practice. You have in the Clavis Magna 12 ways of clothing your subjects. Species, forms, simulacra, images, specters, models, vestigia, indications, signs, figures, characters, and seals. Some work upon the eye, so it is said, art cannot depict what nature cannot. So you've heard that, does art imitate life, art imitate nature? So these are raiments for the spiritual, the heavenly bodies, is what it's saying, and how we perceive them. While some operate through external forms. Now, I don't want to say a definite answer to this because everybody's welcome, to go through this book clearly and say what they interpret it as. But as far as I'm looking at this, that's what it's along these lines. Models are like pictures and also like the figures drawn by magicians. Some of them operate via the internal senses, which magnify, extend, and multiply them in measure, duration, and number as do the things produced by the imaginative faculty. Some of them are things that share a point of resemblance, forms of the same type, or have the substance of a copy of some particular example. And some borrow from the subject's own substance as a sophist borrows from reality. I'll have to brush up on what Sophism is, but I know it's definitely linked to Sophia, the goddess. So I'm going to have to say that the sophist is primarily probably going to be Sophia, a form of fertility goddess worship. So they're saying here, and some borrow from the subject's own substance, as sophists borrow from reality. So sophists sounds like it's along the lines of naturalism, what's innate in nature. Whereas the scientist, the material scientist, borrows from what's in this, right? What's this made of, right? This is made of this substance. Some will be appropriate to any art providing support for all. These are the signs, figures, characters, and seals. Using these, one can act in nature. So here you have as above, so below. Basically creating a sigil that's in relation to the heavenly bodies, just as the ancients used to do in order to produce magic or magical effects upon the planet and within themselves, and to actually achieve something for their own people as a whole. Using these, one can act in nature, above nature, and if the situation requires it, contrary to nature. Those cases occur where figures and images do not yield to the imagination, or for types of figures that do not move, for these lack the characteristics which attack the senses. In other words, lack of difference and disposition, without which the attendants and efficient acts cannot succeed. There's a certain way. I'm going to go on right here. There's a subparagraph. In other words, this is what the author says. So I'm going to go ahead and read what the author is saying. Check my time here, make sure we're still going. In other words, the art of memory requires striking images which stir the emotions and which must have some way to connect them with the ideas that we're trying to memorize. Abstract ideas that don't have a strong visual connection are difficult to memorize with this method, which is why Bruno will connect images to syllables elsewhere in the text as an alternative for words that don't have strong associative properties. So this is chaos magic, right? This is chaos magic. This is what I do in chaos magic. I strike a symbol, I pour my chi into it, and then I expel the chi into a desired manifestation of my reality. So this is almost verbatim what chaos magic is. Abstract ideas that don't have a strong visual connection are difficult to memorize with this method. Excuse me, I'm going to take a note. Abstract ideas that don't have a strong visual connection are difficult to memorize with this method, which is why Bruno will connect images to syllables elsewhere in the text as an alternative for words that don't have strong associative properties. He's saying here that there's words and syllables that are more powerful than other words and syllables. Grasping such ideas, find a part which relates to the image or a part of the image which related to the idea. This is the method of the indications. Indications work through things, efficient causes, imagine, connects and examples of things. This is how models, images, and effigies work. Okay, an effigy, if you're not familiar with what an effigy is, it's similar to what they use in voodoo and other practices. They build an effigy of a certain fetish object. Okay. But one can also correctly use seals, notes, and characters, tried singly or in combination. So we haven't just put this randomly in the middle of our list. Mercury next presented the species of simulacra, forms, images, models, and specters. Moreover, the substance, essence, goodness, justice, and wisdom presented by the notes, characters, and the seals. How many things has Mercury made? And all things that Mercury said or rendered, these are the true models, likewise the images, signs, and so forth. We make this clear demonstration with the aid of Mercury, and we say that this image of virtue, this is a sign, this note, this image. To these considerations, remember that this art is a means rather than an end of its own, to collect sensations, forms, figures, times, and places. So this is where it differs from chaos magic. Because in chaos magic, you're looking for an ends, right? You're looking for an ends. And this is saying the opposite. I don't know, what do you think? It's interesting. This method was already expressed in both its spirit and its technical details in our first book, Clavis Magna, yet this cannot be used for all images. For as many as we can find in memory, there are some that have no imaginable image or suggestion. For these terms uses hypotheses, thoughts, and other signs of that type can be used to signify the concept with imaginable images. And with this in mind, we do not have to omit anything from the possible set of attached images. He's saying it's limitless. There's endless possibility. If the attachment is poor, then the art will produce a poor effect. And this is completely chaos magic. This is describing chaos magic completely. This is describing how much you put into an object, okay, is what you're going to get out of it. What you put into an object of an image is the magic you're going to gain from it. It's important to have a clear view with excellent light for dense darkness, great crowds, scenes that fade into the distance, and such things prevent clear preservation of the scene. It's like a dog chewing on a stone instead of a branch. But this is not dangerous, as others have charged this author. But we have found that if we have been given or developed material places, which are verified by the outer senses, greater care is not needed, as the places in memory hang together naturally. This works as well for purely imaginary architecture, provided it is internally consistent. The prohibition against this, developed in some antique times, is not a proper part of our art. As we have discussed in our book Clavis Magna, consider the concept rather carefully. 35 minutes. Fame is a natural consideration which, like most considerations of proportion, does not deal with private things, or with regard to hidden material, which takes the name of nature, rather with the outer form, its appearance and subject matter, and its efficient uses. There is a connection between the work of the thief, who profits by others' labor, and the power of representation. The art is worth less than the thing it copies. We suppose nothing less than that within dreams all things should be permitted, as the first subject of the nature of art is that it is not only for itself, but also reflects that which is around it. So far, your consideration of the matter requires that, as befits their practice, all the elements of the art beget from forms more elegant, with the general goal of all in a subject a new form of art, and so the same is true with respect to faculty in general graphics, an excellent sense of proportion. Right? When two things are the same size. So here you have the concept of an imperfect demiurge, okay, which created the earth, and the way in which we perceive is imperfect because of the proportions. Okay. So a painting by an internal system produces images of things memorized. There's also the internal writing, using reasons and orders of the words, and gives signs, notes, and characters. All of these dwell in the subjective imagination. Nor shall I deny that they speak to one another like a community, and also to remember things, or also to the verbal retention of ordered forms called images. So I'm going to go ahead and leave off right there and pick up on this tomorrow. I might even actually go ahead and translate this chapter tomorrow. Actually, probably be a good thing to go ahead and do that. So I'll do that tomorrow. Translate this into a few languages. So now I have my itinerary for tomorrow. The goal tomorrow will be to get this done in at least 2 languages, but I'm going to try for tomorrow if everything goes as smoothly as planned. So good night, everybody. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to check me out on DJ Atenohiho, PayPal, SoundCloud, Reverb Nation, Bandcamp, Store Envy. What else am I on? I think that's it. You can look it up. I'm gonna try it. Like I mentioned, I think I have my links already listed up there. Bandcamp, Store Envy, Reverb Nation, PayPal me. I also have Cash App. Okay. And that's it. Namaste. Blessed be. I hope that individuals practice bhakti and raha yoga, because that is the key. That is the key. You have to have that. So much love. Namaste. Good night.